Commissioner Chapman is on the way. She'll be here in just a moment, but we can get started without her. So we will call to order this joint work session with the bridge replacement by state working group in the Port Hood River. Kevin, you want to
Start some
start us off?
introductions? Absolutely. Well, I think, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, the commission. Ben
Shepherd, I'm the president of the Port Hood River. I think I know everybody here.
Heather Garing, treasurer.
Mike Fox on both sides.
Hobie Strike, Commissioner.
Kevin Greenwood, executive director.
Debbie Smith Wagar, the port finance director.
Patty, contracts administrator. I'm Jenny Scholl, the deputy director. Catherine Kiewit, the mayor of Engine.
Jacob Anderson, click that.
Marla Keithler, Mayor Boyd Salmon.
Paul Blackburn, Mayor of Hood River. Arthur Babbitts, Hood River County Commissioner.
Mike Shannon, project manager for the new bridge.
Yeah, let's do the back row too.
Ryan Munoz with bridge replacement.
Daryl Stafford, waterfront manager.
John Mann, facilities director.
Grant Polson, City of Hood River Council. No, Columbia Gorge News.
Where did you want to start? Do we have a presentation that?
Yeah, so Mike Shannon has a presentation, and just to kick things off. So the purpose of this working group is really just an opportunity for the working group and the Port Commission to check in on the bridge replacement project. And so I think that the presentation that Michael has will, are you going to make that?
Laura's gonna do the presentation.
We're gonna tag team.
Tag team it? Okay, that
It
sounds
was a
good.
short straw.
Okay. Great, so if you want to start it off?
Yeah, I'll turn it over to Marla. You gonna kick us off?
Sure. So it's true to form, since this is a workshop session, we really wanted to come before you guys in workshop fashion and start a conversation, because obviously we've kind of taken on the task of coming up with what would be the most reasonable toll increase that we think is needed in order to appropriately build up reserves and help finance the bridge project. But also a deeper layer to that, I think we're mindful of the collaboration that's gone on to this point. I think it's the key reason why we've had so much momentum on this round of achieving a new bridge. And in that spirit, wanted to first come to you guys because we're still doing that work. We're not coming to you today with a recommendation because there's way too many math formulas that are in all of our heads and we don't have it, but we wanted to start the conversation on the bigger picture, realizing that we're always in the weeds on the bridge project and only seeing that tunnel, and wanting to step back and hear from you guys some of maybe your concerns or questions with the information that we share, and then also try to relay as best we can kind of how we feel about the project to this point. So I think Kevin captured it pretty well. It's sort of an update, but hopefully more leads to some good conversation and dialogue that we can then take back and help us inform that eventual recommendation, because we really appreciate and value the collaboration that does exist of you guys wanting to have a recommendation from us that we think best captures, what a toll increase may look like and what is needed. So with that, I guess I might have already captured slide one. We don't really have there's one slide I'm excited about in here, but the rest of these are kind of just to keep us on target and focused. So again, really where we are hoping to come back to you guys at some point later this spring is to have a consensus that we reach and bring that toll increase recommendation forward. But before then, wanting to set that groundwork now of where our heads are at, what we're trying to target as we're identifying that number. And with that, I think the next slide, Mike can probably best jump in and just help give you guys, and maybe this is all, not news to you, but I think to also reset on how we're approaching this spring, knowing that there's other studies being done on the tolling front, and we want to take as much information as we can into account before we settle on a number.
Yeah, so there's two different studies going on. Let's say different. They're actually two parallel studies. The Washington State Transportation Commission is doing a TNR study that the Washington legislature asked them to do to look at what the opportunities were or areas were availability of tolling on the bridge, and what were some limits that would be there. And then that was more of a long-term look. And then what our group is doing to support that is the short-term look. And the reason both of those are important is when we go out for TIFIA loans, which is going to be part of this project finance plan, is we're going to have to get a TIFIA loan. In order to close, that's gonna be the local contribution, is to use the tolling to leverage. Some sort of 50 loan or low interest loan, to complete the kind of picture on the project. So there's two pieces to that when you look at the 50 loan. One is you have to have reserves, which is the short term when you go into actually close on the 50 loan. They want you to have a certain amount of reserves in place. And then the other component of that is long term, the amount of money that you're requesting from Tiffy, can you pay those bills? And there's two components that they're gonna be looking at when we do that. So what we're evaluating and looking at is what is the best way to set up the projects to have the most success with getting that Tiffy loan and filling the funding need, but also capturing what the community and the other areas are looking at when they're looking at that whole increase related to that. So in order to do that, there are some key components that just aren't quite done yet. That will really provide a lot of additional data for that. One of them is the traffic and revenues for the Washington State Transportation Commission. That data is getting there. They came in yesterday and gave us a briefing. They're going to come back on the 20th and actually the 21st to give you a briefing. Next week on the 14th, they're giving a briefing to the Transportation Commission. So that's evolving. It's getting there. They're getting the data together. They'll have good data in May to where we can really start putting those things together and really getting a better picture of what the numbers are going to be. As well as then the port is putting together kind of getting a picture of their financial situation, and they'll have that roughly in the April timeframe. And then the last piece is you've got PFM, which is your municipal advisor, which really is the only person that can give you legal financial advice on what you should do or what investments will look like for you. So they need to take the data that's being generated from this TNR study as well as support information, put all that in together and look at it, and then come back and be able to give you kind of some real hard information on what the financial picture of that is. So that information will be available in June. So we have some kind of high level, but there's some pluses and minuses in there because we just don't have all the detailed information to give somebody a much more refined picture of what the finance will look like.
Thanks, Mike. Any questions on that? Okay, good.
I think you should be real clear since Noah's sitting right behind you. When you hear total increase, why?
Yes, and so where we are in, can I skip a slide?
Sure.
Okay. I'll throw your stuff. I went back really fast. So when you look at this, when you look at the schedule that's up here, the financial picture for the project is we have really four sources of funds. We have Washington, Oregon, federal, and local. What we're asking right now on the project is for Washington and Oregon to put 125 million onto the project. The current project total cost is 520 million. That's what's projected today. So there's 125 from Washington, 125 from Oregon. We're getting really good response from Washington right now that we're looking to get some of that money early, which is very encouraging to the project that we're going to get that 75 million actually programmed earlier, which allows us to continue moving with the momentum that we have. Oregon actually took the first step this year in putting a bill. They have Senate Bill 431, which has the 125 million in it. We'll see where that transitions between now and June. And the feds then are going to be the last money. They were asking for 200. We're looking through a number of different grants to get that put together, but they will not do anything until they see some movement from the locals and from the state sides and from the local side. They will be the last money prior to getting a Tiffy line. And then the local is really going to close that gap, right? So best case scenario, if we get the 125 from each state, we get the 200 from the feds, that leaves us with roughly a 70 million gap that we have to fill. And we're looking to fill that through Tiffy loans. Now, something happens to any one of those sources, then that Tiffy loan is going to have that line of credit basically that fills that gap for us. And that's kind of the overall picture of how we're trying to put the funding together for the project.
And to my understanding, to be able to apply for those Tiffy loans, we need to have reserves of a certain amount, and that is why we're looking at a total increase to fund that ability.
Correct. So based on the schedule that we're looking at, right now, we're looking at starting construction in 2025 and having the bridge open by 2029. In order to be able to do that, you have to have the reserves in place before you need the Tiffy line. That puts the need for the reserves somewhere in the 26 to 28 timeframe, depending on when we need to get the money, how much we get, but roughly that timeframe. And then we have to have the full reserves amount, which is O&M and different numbers on top of having your first year that Tiffy is going to ask for is in 29, right before you open the bridge. So that's kind of pushing our schedule. And in order to build those reserves that we need, which are in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 million, we got to start now, because every year you delay, it's inevitable. We have to do it. And the earlier you start, the less you can, you have to do over time to be able to generate this.
So let me add into just a minute. So we want to use the TIFIA money as the absolute last money we use on this project, which if everything else holds true, that last money will be for dismantlement of the current bridge and probably the last year and a half of construction of the new bridge. So it pushes it out on the back end, which means we need, that $70 million. We would have to close on a TIFIA loan 28, 27, 28 type time range. What we're trying to build in here too is some flexibility, because we think with a little bit of luck, we can accelerate the schedule by another year if all the funding comes together. So what we don't want to do is hamstring ourselves in that we got the acceleration underway, but we don't have the TIFIA loan. We don't have enough reserve to close the TIFIA loan to support that 1 year acceleration. So all of that kind of goes into this formula that we're talking about.
It's probably also worth explaining. We have this funding stack, which is described here, and it's nice and pretty, and it adds up to 520 million. But Mike, could you explain what of that is actually, what can we take to the bank and what is prospective?
So right now, the top line, the grants that we currently have, we have 20 million that we currently have in the bank. Of that, about 7 million of that has already been spent. We have about 13 million left. Of that, about 4 million is already committed to activities over the next year. So we've got that remaining piece to get us through, and that really is going to get us enough to get the RFP done, get some survey, get some right-of-way elements done. And then the other money that we have is the 75 million that Washington put in the Move Ahead Washington package. And what they didn't do was tell us what year we're going to have that. But what we're hearing is that their recommendation is going to be to put 15 million in this year, 30 million in next year, and then 30 million a year after that is potentially what can happen. And that we're positioned to get that. If the Senate's going to go that way, if the House goes that way, then we'll get that funding. That allows us to then move forward with our progressive design build. And then we can get our contractor on board, our final designer on board, and start working towards an early construction project in 25. What that also does is Washington closes their sessions in April. So we'll know in roughly April, what Washington's going to do with their funds. Oregon's not going to make that decision until probably May or June. So we will be able to go back to Oregon and say, hey, Washington stepped up. You need to do something. Here's where we're at. And we can put a lot of pressure on Oregon then to step up and do their part. And then if we can get those two pieces all together, then we can go to the feds and say, hey, we've got this, we've got all these things put into place. Where are you at with your funding? So it's kind of a dominoes effect, but we have to have that first one, and we're hearing really good things from Washington that they're going to be the first ones in and really set us up to get the thing moving.
And we've also been working very hard with Oregon, and we've been pushing for 30 million this year.
Yes.
We're going to get 30, who knows? But we're pushing hard on it.
So I think the project is positioned very, very, very well to actually see funding and actually see it go forward. And I think if we can stay the course, we can keep things moving. I think the project has a very good chance of getting the funding that we want.
Yeah, I mean, to pick back up, and I'm glad we jumped ahead to the schedule because it is part of this whole conversation, which is that there are a lot of things falling our way on this project yet. even though we have had such good momentum and we feel strong support and have seen strong support from Washington and a lot of opportunity at the federal level, we all are becoming more aware of how much of a tightrope we're on, that any one thing shifting us off course wipes away our best selling point to this date, which is our strong local buy-in and bi-state partnerships, not just within our working group, but with the port, with all of the local region, our businesses. We've had strong participation throughout this year of being able to bring stakeholders to the table and make this case for us in Oregon and Washington. But back to that project timeline, these years are so critical to get this funding secured to stay on this goal of like a 2029, 2030 bridge opening. And as Mike mentioned, the tolling component is critical now for us to be figuring out what it is we need to increase to in order to build these reserves so that we're ready to leverage that financing opportunity, assuming all these other things fall into place. And so I think while we are in this topic all the time, I would imagine we all agree that in our different positions, the most important thing we can do or realize for our communities is the replacement of this bridge before it becomes unusable or unpassable or something that no one wants to see happens. And that's where, if Mike can go back one slide, and maybe our break for relief, kind of, history repeating itself. We are coming up next month on exactly 100 years when this was the front page of the Hood River Glacier, that a plan was materializing. And a lot of it sounds familiar, bi-state groups coming together. The name they chose actually is close to the name we just chose for the new Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority. But I think it's back to that North Star goal here of whatever we want to be doing in our certain communities or counties or as the port. This is a legacy that we all have the opportunity right now to pass the baton successfully to the next group who hopefully is there at a ribbon cutting in 29. And all of that framing how we're approaching this part that we need to deliver on now, this toll increase, and how we're going to get that message into the community at the right time and give you a recommendation, because ultimately it's your decision, it's your bridge, on what we all feel comfortable taking to the community. So if you jump ahead now, back past the schedule, and this is where I think it goes further into what we're taking into account. And the top 5 are pretty settled in terms of all of us seeing this as, and Mike even touched on it. The main goal here is that we have to get these reserves, 15 million by 2028, 21 million by 2029, achieving that borrowing capacity, hoping on that low end, but accounting for something up towards 140, 150. The goal too, to try as best we can, but realizing this might not be achievable, to minimize that impact on the local toll paying residents, honor the existing agreements that we've already had with this bridge project as it's moved to this point. But most critically, building that reserve as quickly as possible so that if we need to be pursuing that in a slightly accelerated timeline, we're ready. So that kind of leads to these 2 that we highlighted, because this is more a conversation and discussion we feel with you guys, you're the port commissioners. And that first one that's flagged, the implementing a single or multiple toll, it's been brought up before, like what are those logistics of how toll increases happen? Historically, what has the preference been at the port, so that we can factor that into the different formulas we're considering. And then this last one has really become more clear, and back to that schedule. We have these, like, I think you had the little capital icon, but there's 4 of them and we're in the second one. So we're halfway through making these funding opportunities realized for that projected timeline. So we're at the halfway point. And in our conversations in Olympia and Salem, again, the thing that we can tout the most is the sweat equity here, how much time we're all putting in, the unified front that we present on this project that separates it from the others they might be considering. But it's clear in either house, state house, that any project is vulnerable to being looked at to find a reason not to fund, because we're all competing for the same things. And so when we're thinking about this toll increase, we've been weighing, of course, well, how is this going to get received locally, or how do we make sure that people are on board? Because this always is a fraught topic. But then also thinking, well, how does it present potentially in either Oregon or Washington is we're asking them to give us money on this project. And that if we are able to show sooner than later that the full tolls currently with this new increase that are coming in are going to either the maintaining and repairing of the existing bridge, because we know that is still a big cost and you guys are working to push some things out, but depending on that timeline, that might still need to get accounted for. And then that increased portion that we very cleanly say, this is for that new bridge. And so that's where we really want to bring the discussion forward to you guys of, can we start to find alignment or consider what does that timeline look like to fully maximize contribution from the tolls over to the bridge? And that is not fully our space. So I think we also want to understand better where the port might be approaching this topic, because we've just been focusing on, okay, the toll increases for the bridge, but there's this other layer of the toll, the other amount, and how does that get split out? And what does that look like going forward of that phasing down or directing more funds over to that bridge maintenance account as we're nearing those future years where more maintenance is expected? And I think for us, we feel like it would be disingenuous to be bringing any recommendation forward of a number without better understanding how the port is tracking on what does, you know, that drawdown or that changing of the toll allocations look like between now and, you know, assuming a 2029 bridge completion date if we stay on track.
It's probably worth just reminding everybody, I'm sure you know how construction projects work. Staying on track is so incredibly important to keeping the budget anywhere near what this is. So if you start to see any delays, any shifts, I see the smiling, so obviously I don't have to go any farther. It's just keeping on schedule, accelerating by a year if possible is, especially in this inflationary environment, is just absolutely critical to keeping the budget anywhere near this 520 million that we've identified.
It all makes sense, but to be honest with you, the Port of Hood River started this knowing that tolls are going to go away. And we decided we're going to do this, we're going to do it this way. Obviously, tolls are going away when bridge opens. We did that consciously. It's the right thing to do. Yesterday was the very first time I've even heard a mention of what you just talked about. So we haven't had that discussion.
And we don't expect you to, because honestly, it's only become more clear to us to bring this forward in the recent weeks when we've been diving more fully similarly into like, okay, we're at it. Now it's 2023, this toll study is underway at the state. We've got to wrap our heads around what an increase looks like. And it's when there was kind of this light bulb moment of, well, what are the vulnerabilities here, right? Like, what are the positives if we go with this amount, and what are, you know, some potential red flags? And one key flag was just this critical period this year and next year of making this case to Salem and Olympia and getting the state buy-in. What is our answer if a question comes back on tolling once this increase and we're messaging an increase to them to pay for the bridge? If some of those dollars aren't going over to a bridge account, how do we respond to that? What is our answer? And that's, you know, where we're looking to you, because it's not our answer to give and it's not our decision to make. But I think wanting to understand, as we were thinking, boy, is this a missed liability of, if we just all stay the course and the original assumption was we're going to increase tolls and just that amount goes to the bridge, do we risk one of these other big funding allocations that we need that's a higher cost for our communities than maybe coming to you guys and saying, is there any openness or willingness to consider a timeline of redirecting tolls over to the bridge project that's sooner than when the new bridge actually physically opens?
And I think what I add to it, there's another major unknown here, and Kevin and I spent a little time talking about this earlier today. Our governments, we're used to having a very predictable set of expenses and a predictable revenue stream. In this case, we're entering a time where your predictability is going to be incredibly poor, because you don't know how that bridge out there is going to fare. We don't know what surprises there may be. we've always known that that bridge is going to become a liability. We don't know exactly, it may become a liability before any of this discussion that we're talking about even matters, or maybe it may be that it lasts until the day that someone's out there with a jackhammer or however they knock down a bridge and it is removing it, and then we just have the $30 to $50 million to actually get it out of the water safely. But there's that lack of knowledge and predictability to this, that even if you decide to steer the funding entirely into a bridge fund, it's still not it's still not completely clear that the money that's going to the bridge fund is going into the new bridge or into repairing the old bridge.
I don't want to hog all the questions, let's have lots of them. And this is gonna tie into the funding that you were just talking about, that we get from the states and probably the federal government too. Once the commission, the bi-state commission is, I mean, I signed a document a few weeks ago. Are you guys, do you have it on your schedules to get that done too? So once that's done, I think July 1st is a hope so date. That entity then is completely separate from the Port of Hood River. Completely separate from the city of Hood River. Is it just optics then that the money going in would be going to that? Through that group into that fund, it would not be coming to the Port of Hood River. The Port of Hood River would not be applying for that money. Is it just optics that there are tolls, even though they're coming here and the money's going to be over here? It's not the same organization collecting tolls that's asking for the money. So then does it just become an optical thing? Because I can understand how the port, if I, the port, am applying for money, I'm getting this $100, but I didn't put my $3 in.
Let me see if I can take the first shot.
Does that make sense?
You're talking about tolls with grants.
Yeah.
Either or, because
The tolls are to your account, the grants come into the
exactly.
bridge
So
fund.
aren't there, isn't that two different things? Or is it just an optics thing? Like, well, you are kind of, you should be using that.
Well,
Right.
I understand the question.
there's a couple different ways that you can do that. The new grants have always been assumed that the new authority would be applying for those grants and it goes direct drive through them. A toll increase, an incremental toll increase for this period of time. One thought is that incremental cost or revenue would go into a dedicated account that becomes the responsibility of the new authority for that particular account. Let's just say that we're going to raise, we agree, we're going to raise toll rates by 50 cents. Whatever that generates goes into this special account, and it's monitored, managed, spent by the new authority. The remainder of the tolls that are being collected stays over here, stays with the port. And it's under the responsibility of the port what you're going to do with it, what we're going to do with it. But there is a thought that maybe some of that goes into a bridge repair / replacement. So some of these costs that engineering is saying we're about to get hit with, we're going to have to fund that somehow from the port. And that's part of where that fund could come from. So
I guess my question is more, is it? I mean,
Yeah, I think back to
what's-
the optics side, so let me coming
it's
out.
not, it's
but,
not, you know.
Of course, sure, but this first year is odd timing. So the CFA that we are all signing over the course of our meetings this month, the commission formation agreement, and this authority being staged up July 1, doesn't sync so nicely with all the funding application windows. So quite likely there's applications getting submitted for this round that are again going to present as Port of Hood River or joint with Clickitat County, whatever. These are the only entities that are formed. But then there's this hard thing we have to solve of building up that reserve. So already landing in that space of, okay, if there's a toll increase, it's that extra, the 50 cents or whatever, we get it, that needs to go. That's how we'll help build the reserves. But that other component of the building, bridge repair and maintenance, regardless of the new authority when they come online, I think we're just trying to acknowledge that more, less about the optics and more just the reality of there is this existing bridge. We know there's maintenance that you guys are on the hook for and need to cover, and that toll supports that. And so, yes, that should still support it. It should stay over on the port. That's not the new authority's business or our business. But as we keep going into these funding conversations at the federal level, the mentioning often of Title 23, which would be about the new bridge, but at the state levels, the questions of, well, what's the local buy-in? Perhaps some of it is the optics of we're worried it's an uncomfortable answer that we might have to give, or that this question will come at some point, especially as we're pushing further with Salem and Olympia of, well, now that you have this toll increase, how is that money being spent? And it's hard to, we anticipate that being a hard answer to give if one of the splits is going somewhere that's not drawn back to the bridge. And ultimately that is still a hard place to be putting the port in, because we need this timeline and this project to be successful to solve this other bigger problem we all have, which is this bridge is just, we're all in agreement it needs to get replaced. If we don't deliver and set up this authority and keep on track, that puts the port at further risk of longer life of this bridge and more costly repairs that will pull more of the bridge toll that stays at the port.
So one question that I have is, and again, discussion, this is all very new, is, the current bridge allocation, we do have a bridge repair and replacement fund that we funnel part of the tolls into. If we were to decide to do a toll increase, whether it be 50 cents or whatever, and say that money is going to go into this brand new fund that specifically is for generating reserves for the new bridge, doesn't that seem like then if we're still operating on funneling some of our tolls into bridge repair and replacement, that we could, if there was a need for something, you guys could come to us and say, we need to be able to show we have this reserve fund, you guys have it in your repair and replacement fund. It seems like that could work that way, and then we would be able to protect the maintenance of the bridge by keeping that repair and replacement fund over on our side.
See, I personally, I don't have a problem with that, as long as we're using 50 cents. If 50 cents goes into a dedicated account that's moved over there, because we need that independence, if you will, for validation and going for the TIFIA loan and showing credit worthiness and all the rest of that stuff. It's got to get some separation, I believe.
There has to be a bank account that says
Yeah.
Hood River, White Salmon
Yeah.
Bridge Authority,
And
and
it's got
it
the
has
money.
this number of dollars. So that, we know that has to build up. But then the second piece is that we share the problem of having this existing bridge, and John Mann's amazing, but no matter what he does, he's not going to be able to magically guarantee that there aren't major expenses that come along. And we and you can't accept the bridge failing and not making it until the date that the new bridge is there. So it's really is, part of it's optics, part of it's credit worthiness, and then part of it's the gamble on how lucky we are with being able to stretch the life of the existing bridge. That's what's going to determine kind of how you need to split those funds. And that's why, we've gone through this, we've gone around and around that. Well, what does it look like? With this number of cents here, this number of cents here. I think you're probably right that at the end of the day, there's only a few pieces that absolutely have to be in a specific place. And the reserve amount has to be in a specific place, or else you can't go to whoever it is who authorized the TIFIA loans to demand that. But short of that, the other pieces, we're kind of working on the same thing. When I say we, I'm talking now the Bi-State Bridge Authority. They're two separate governmental entities that share one common. All the goals aren't shared, but there is the common goal shared that the existing bridge has to stretch until the date that the new one is there.
Optically thinking, I think the easiest way to think about this is a marriage. And it's a marriage because in 2029, hopefully, as soon as we all sign our sides of the CFA, the liability of the bridge, that $30 to $50 million now sits on us. And it behooves us to build a bridge as quickly as possible, because that keeps that number low as possible for the removal. It also best fits you guys as well, because it's still, we're all in this together. And so I think of it as, yeah, we need to make a total increase to have it go into an account. You guys also passed the 2018 bridge repair and replacement account. And so that whole, at least on our side of the river, that was sold as, this is for the new bridge. And the amount of money that's going into that, once the new bridge is taken down, you know, whatever's left would hopefully go into the new bridge, because that keeps our goal of having the toll as low as possible. I think where we're gonna find the issue with optics, especially with Title 23 and everything, because this is a marriage. As soon as we start spending federal dollars on this, the feds are gonna say, well, you're using our money to tear down that bridge. That creates a federal nexus. And so at that point, all dollars that are come off of that bridge need to be going either into the repair and replacement account or into the account that's held by, you know, by State Bridge Authority.
Is that when you spend it one tippy $1, then you're there?
That's the way I'd understand. It wouldn't be even the tippy dollars,
It'd be
it would actually be
like
the
a-
federal grant dollars.
It
Yeah.
could even be sooner than that, depending on what funding board Washington gives us. So if Washington gives us 15 million next year, but it's part of their federal allocation.
That could tie back to the
That
federal.
could,
that could create the
potentially could tie us back.
But how does
Are you
that,
familiar with Title 23? Is that-
Yeah. but how does that work if the TIFIA, the Title 23 dollars or the federal dollars are only allocated for the new bridge?
That's the gray area that we feel like there's some gray there that
Well-
could go either way.
So we need to figure that piece out.
I think the biggest issue that we're gonna see is we're asking the federal government for $200 million, and we're asking each state for $125 million. And every one of them would love to say no. And if you're sitting there with the possibility of a state representative who's gonna say, why am I giving money to the Port of Hood River in another state so that you guys can redirect it somewhere else? Why is that money not every dime coming off that bridge, not going to the current bridge or the new bridge? In order to put your 2 cents into it, because you know, when they see this tolling study, they want to know how much money can we raise locally, because that's money they don't have to pay for.
Yeah, and I think that's an internal discussion that we're going to have is because we've gone through timelines and, you know, our biggest commitment has been, you know, we recognize that the bridge has been a subsidy. It has subsidized a lot of our other activities here that are important to our constituents and important to our community. I think everything that you guys have done has been astounding. I don't think that we would be where we're at sitting here right now without all of the work that you guys have put in. So kudos. But I also think that we need to be mindful of, we kind of had a timeline and we kind of had a thing. And so I think we need to figure out some of these gray areas to figure out how do we work all together as a marriage to figure this very complex equation out.
And I'm afraid that some of the gray areas may not be knowable,
Right.
right? This concept, this nexus and this what triggers what, you may not be able to get a perfectly clear answer from anybody on that until someone challenges you, and then you're kind of screwed.
And I think that's a great point that. No, I don't think anybody's gonna come out and say, yes, this is exactly how Title 23 works, because honestly, I don't know if anybody understands it enough to be able to do that. But if someone challenges you on it, you don't want to be on the wrong side of that challenge, and that's when they will come in and say, and they will have all the power to say, oh, but we can link it because we can, and now you have violated this, right? So I think that's the thing we gotta be concerned about, is that happening.
But I think the best defense to that is, as best as we can, run through some likely scenarios, and how do we provide the isolation and the separation that we don't get into Title 23 back with the port. And that's going to take some calories to do, but I think we got to do it. What we don't want to do is, 2 years from now, all of a sudden, we're flopped into Title 23, and that really hurts the port.
Well, remember, 2 years from now, you could also discover that you wake up in the morning, there's a chunk of the bridge missing.
Mhm.
This is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. This isn't with this plastic.
Mhm.
But, so there is, in several ways, there's a, like I said, there's a surprising amount of uncertainty to what we're doing.
I agree with what Jake said, that the most important thing, I believe, to my constituents is making the good case for that local money. I agree that we can't go to Oregon and say, hey, give us money. And they say, how much have you put in? And we say, well, we wish it was more. I think the best thing that we can do for the making that case is I wish there was more money in the replacement fund already. I think that, I mean, I've been to the fly-in and I love it. And my kid played lacrosse on Marina Green and I love it. And my daughter worked at Freem 3 summers and I love it. But in my opinion, the most important thing that the port should be doing now is maximizing our case for funding the new bridge. And it's your shop and I run my shop, but in my opinion, that's the most important thing, is getting funding into the replacement fund quicker and quick.
So that brings up a good question, because are there other funding mechanisms that are available to the city, like transient lodging taxes, other things that, and I don't know what I don't know, but are there other funding mechanisms that are available not to a port, but maybe to a city or to a county that we could look at that could also maybe participate as it's all the same constituents? Could we look at other things that the county could say, well, we could possibly have this funding mechanism, the city could say this? I'm not, like I said, I don't know what I don't know, but.
Yeah.
Is it a discussion?
So
Just to clarify, are you talking about supplementing new bridge funding, or are you talking about supplementing non-bridge port related activities to the benefit of the community?
yeah, so
Not sure.
that's what I was gonna answer. I'll answer the latter. So all of the sources that we work with require voter approval.
Right.
There are multiple mechanisms through which the community, and this is on the Oregon side, the community could agree to funding various activities. So you can create a new district and give the district a permanent rate limit. That permanent rate limit can be designed to provide for operation of an airport, marina. That goes through a voter. That goes to the voters for approval. There are operating levies, 5-year fees, which go to the voters for approval. So there are and capital levies, if you're talking about building something, goes to the voters for approval. So we're not talking about anything that could instantly address an issue, but I know that there are some very interesting things that the port commissioner's been talking about concerning your existence after the toll stream is gone. And there's the ability, there's the legal ability to make a case for asking the voters to approve something.
Yeah.
That's not how that would all work.
So currently, when you talk about the revenue reserve coming from local, the definition of local is the port,
Toll revenue.
toll revenue.
It's toll revenue, right? So the port has a proprietary right to toll passage across the river, and we're talking about that as a funding stream, correct?
Okay, and then is there a percentage of the reserve that you're hoping to come from local?
So the reserve fund for PTO will have to all come from.
Oh,
Meaning, and local in the sense that,
Okay.
everybody that runs across the bridge is a payer of that, right? So it's Washington, it's visitors, it's Oregon, so it's that creating that reserve
Okay.
fund through the toll collection.
The local's kind of a misnomer. It's
Okay.
It's really user fee, right?
Tolls are the
Better to look
easy-
at it as the user fee.
Tolls are the easy one. Have any other boards had any discussions about other potential sources to fund that?
Does it have to be just user fees for local?
We need to have the reserves in an account. if somebody wanted to make a private donation, I'm assuming we could do that.
I did buy a lottery ticket for the bridge when it was up at $1 billion, but, or billion, sorry, not. We didn't win, sorry.
You went.
And I guess I would say the concern with that would be the view of the people using the bridge now having to go through some other mechanism, because it would have to come some other local funding source, which is probably some other tax, and they would be, my question would be, if I was doing that, well, why is it not coming from the bridge, and show me that the bridge can't do this before you take money from some other source that I have to pay, because now I'm paying bridge money that I feel like should go to the bridge, and now you're taxing me for something that I'm already paying. So I think that would be the question we have to answer.
Let's answer that real quick. How many crossings a year do we have? Estimate. How many crossings are there?
4 million.
About 4 million?
Yeah.
And okay, so say, and you need 20. So say you increase a total of $1, you're 5 years out from getting it, but you want to apply for tipping money before that.
And
Is that kind of where this comes from?
and we want to ask Oregon for money before that.
Before that. And you have, but that 20 million, whatever it is at the time, that specifically is a requirement for TIPIA funds, not for state.
Right, that's for two.
But it
it
looks good,
also-
it looks good, really, really good when it comes to talking to the states.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean, it's covered, everybody asks, what's the locals doing, because they all see this, the local problem, right? Because it's a local bridge, it's not a state bridge or a federal bridge.
And every time we've had that discussion and we've said that we're looking at a toll increase sometime this summer, it always landed very well.
Well, and I think to bring back those optics, so then on the local level, say it's a 250, and that news is the headline at some point in 2023. We know that our residents question, especially as a Washington entity, where if we were to do it, that bridge is something we are often driving across 2 to 3 round trips a day. So when our residents see toll increase, or they're thinking about toll, they think, when I'm driving across that bridge, I am paying my share into the new bridge. They're not thinking I'm paying a share into amenities that Hood River residents are accessing, or amenities that are not linked to this thing that I'm paying to use that I keep hearing is at end of life. And the ability to build a reserve off of that toll is what we have focused on, because of that traffic volume and size is much more than, if White Salmon was to leverage an additional tax on 2,500 residents, or some of the limitations we have on how we could even bring something like that forward. And so to reach those numbers, those 10,000 trips a day are more directly linked and give us a formula to work with that also feels like a cleaner line to stay in. And I think that's where that optics side is top of mind for us too, of how does that land with our residents? How do we explain that they still need to cross the bridge, that some portion of those dollars isn't going to a bridge? And when, does that maybe shift to, yes, all of those dollars are going to either repairing that structure you use, or building up the reserve for the new one we know you need.
I think along with that, it's also a matter of a statement of priority. Mayor Blackburn and I both will benefit from the sorts of things that the port is doing with the toll funds other than bridge related things. But the question that has to be asked is, are those things more important to the community than the replacement of the bridge itself? And that's kind of, I think that's what you wind up weighing as you deal with this.
But I think it's safe to say that, and correct me if I'm wrong, our biggest funding gap that we have is our public spaces and our park spaces. And so for the port, we have to look at, we've provided these public spaces to the community for many, many years. They enjoyed it. Maybe it's, again, this gray area of a conversation of, if we're going to make this leap and say, this is what we're going to commit to, how can the city and the county then work with us and say, okay, well, now we're going to help you guys come up with this funding gap? Because it's, I believe the majority of our other, airport, marina, our commercial things, they're basically solvent. If not, I think we're on budget to be solvent in the next year or two. And so, you know, that could be the potential solution on more partnerships.
You know, what you've identified, there's when you stop spending toll money on things that the community benefits from, you leave a hole in the community. And you're asking how we address that. And I think that's exactly the question that you as commissioners are going to have to ask. And I can say, as a commissioner, I mean, you and I have already been talking about this. So you know that I agree with you that this is something that we as a group have to solve for our community. And I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that there's the immediate need to make sure that we don't get any risk at all to the bridge funding stack.
Mhm.
And you know, I really feel like one thing that hasn't been stated is we're marching forward with all of this, presuming that here's your schedule, this is what it's going to look like, this is what's going to happen. None of this is a certainty. And I don't know how to say it any more delicately. I'm still not pessimistic, but I still recognize that there is a scenario in which we do not achieve the funding that we need to build this bridge. If we do not get the state funding, we do not get the federal funding, making this happen with local funding is unthinkably
Not gonna happen.
So that's why, you know, we've been in the weeds on all the numbers and looking at this. Okay, wait a minute, this is, I think, why that elevates the degree to which we're losing sleep over, you know, are we doing everything that we can to make this look the best possible? I mean, you know, talking with Representative McLean, who's the chair of the Joint Transportation Committee in Salem, and talking with Senator King, you know, are we doing everything that we can to give them the tools so that they can help make sure that the funding comes to us?
Right.
That's what we're talking about.
I would commit the city to helping the messaging of, hey, Hood River, you've been getting a sweet deal. Marla drives across the bridge and we get to play in the park, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. About, sorry, Hood River, you're gonna have to take a haircut. You're gonna have to enjoy the less amenities because it's more important that that money go to the bridge. I think that message is a very important one, and we've come to appreciate it for so long, and we've been living off of that really nice funding source, but I believe that it's now in conflict with our best interests.
As we were saying, this is a marriage.
As you could say.
I don't. And we from the Washington side, you know, we like to say we don't reap the benefits, but that's not true. I fly into the Hood River Airport. I use the marina. I use the parks, and I have for years. We've all been, our community, this one gorge community has been reaping the benefits because we've been paying for it together through the bridge toll. I think what it comes down to now is we all have to, in this marriage, agree that we can work together to find a way to pay for those, help pay for those things that the bridge toll's been subsidizing, so that we can all come to the table, so that when we go back to Washington for the next 50 million, we can say, hey, we as a community, we've all come together, and they're gonna have to step down from that, you know, subsidization, so that it can go into the current bridge and the new bridge, because that's what we're doing. And we're asking you, the state, for a lot of money. And rather than a zero cold cutoff, we've looked at that, and that's not what the community wants to do. That's not what the partners want to do. But we have to have something that you guys can design from your budget that makes sense, so that we can sell that logically to the people that matter to make these decisions.
The phrase I keep using is date certain. Right? It can't be this fuzzy concept that, well, you know, there's gonna be a new bridge built, and at some point the toll booth for the old bridge is gone, so I guess that toll's not coming in. There needs to be a date certain.
We obviously have plenty to talk about,
Yeah.
and we are entering into our, I mean, this is all a new idea in the last 24 hours to us. And so thank you for sharing it, and we're entering into our budget season where we're gonna see where does this bridge revenue go throughout all of our properties, entities, and different things. So we're gonna actually be able to see where everything is specifically. So that's gonna happen fairly soon. This is not gonna be a part of that discussion, I think. So we might need more information soon. We might need more regular updates soon on what you're hearing as far as funding and, different things that are going on. I'm assuming that can come from you, but we'll probably have a lot of questions here over the next month or two. So,
And you do have the Washington State Transportation Commission will be coming on the 21st.
Yep.
And they'll give you an update on where they are. I think that'll be informative also.
perfect.
They've got lots of numbers for you.
Yeah.
It's also the same day you'll be receiving your audit.
That's gonna be a fun meet.
That's fun.
Loads of fun.
Gonna be lots of numbers.
It's 5 o'clock. We probably should open that door and let those people come. Even though I think this is public here. Anything else? You'd like to?
Just two milestones. One you already mentioned is March 21st. The commission will be receiving its audit. As part of that, staff will be presenting some documentations as far as like P&Ls and easy to read sheets with some pie charts showing how the tolls have been used over that fiscal year. So that's going to be that'll be a big milestone date. The other one is the April 4th planning session. And that's when we're hoping to have some 10-year projections, and a lot of assumptions go into those projection models. But I think those are some tools that staff can help and work with the commission on to try to figure out a phased approach to this problem.
Or at least that will give us some insight of how much these other funds go to some of these other areas that perhaps we work with other jurisdictions to find other alternative funding, if we want to keep the level of service at the same.
So just those two dates.
This was exactly an hour's worth of discussion.
Yay.
What's it?
I try to respect
Thanks, guys.
everybody's time.